It feels like every day the headlines are just hammering us with the same problems.
Yeah.
Like this widening gap between the super rich and, well,
Right.
pretty much everyone else, and unemployment sticking around,
Yeah.
even with all this like crazy new technology popping up all the time.
Yeah.
And of course, the big one, climate change and the whole environmental crisis.
For sure.
It really makes you wonder,
Yeah.
like, is the way we've been running things economically,
Right.
is it actually working for most people?
Right.
Or even for the planet itself?
Exactly.
Makes you think maybe this traditional capitalist model,
Yeah.
maybe it's not the end-all be-all,
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It is. And that's exactly the territory we're going to dig into today.
Oh,
We've got these excerpts from Muhammad Yunus's book, A World of Three Zeros.
Right.
And he lays out a really powerful alternative, a different way to think about the economy.
Okay.
Like, he straight up challenges the status quo. Okay.
His vision is a world with zero poverty,
Wow.
zero unemployment, and zero net carbon emissions.
That's a
I know.
That's a pretty ambitious goal.
It is a hugely ambitious vision.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So for this deep dive, we're going to get into Yunus's core arguments from the book.
Sounds good.
And we're going beyond just summarizing. We want to really unpack his critique of the system we've got now.
Absolutely.
And try to understand this new framework he's talking about based on social business.
Exactly.
So for everyone listening today, our mission is to grasp the big flaws Yunus sees in the current economic model.
Right.
And to really explore the potential he sees in this alternative, this more socially driven approach.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this thing, starting with where Yunus thinks the current system is failing.
Okay, so one of the most insightful things in Yunus's work is this point he makes that even with all the crazy technological progress we've seen,
and this, massive amount of wealth accumulated globally, these basic economic problems like poverty and inequality, they're not just sticking around.
Right.
They're actually getting worse in many ways.
It seems so counterintuitive.
It does.
Like, you'd think with all the advancements, things would be getting better for everyone.
That's the assumption, right?
Yeah.
But Yunus is arguing that this dominant vision of capitalism, which economists often call neoclassical economics, it just hasn't lived up to its promises.
Yeah.
The promise of solving these really fundamental issues.
So what he's saying is all this wealth hasn't actually trickled down.
Basically. And the result, as he sees it, is this, huge and growing inequality.
Right.
And that leads to a ton of serious problems.
Okay, so then he's also questioning, I guess, what you could call this blind faith we seem to have in these profit-driven markets. The way they're set up now to solve, like, all the world's problems.
It's a magic bullet.
Right, exactly.
He's pushing back against that.
So when it comes to inequality, he's saying we can't just assume that the economy as it is right now is going to somehow magically fix things.
Right.
In fact, it sounds like he's saying the opposite.
He is.
That these problems could actually get a lot worse and pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it's important to understand what Yunus stresses here.
Okay.
This isn't just a problem for the people he calls the losers in this capitalist competition.
Which, when you think about it, is a lot of people.
It is a significant portion of the global population, for sure.
Yeah.
And he makes a really compelling case that this rising inequality doesn't just affect those at the very bottom. It's like a ripple effect that impacts the whole social and political landscape.
So he's saying it impacts everyone.
Everyone, even the wealthy, because it hinders overall economic progress and ultimately lowers the quality of life for everybody.
This is where it gets really interesting, because he connects this rising inequality to some pretty major global events and social trends that we've all seen.
Yeah.
He talks about Occupy Wall Street, the Tea Party, the Arab Spring,
Brexit vote,
the election of Donald Trump, and the rise of right-wing nationalism and racism.
All over the world.
Yeah, and all these hate groups that seem to be popping up everywhere.
It's a trend.
And he doesn't see these as just isolated events.
Right.
He's framing them as consequences of people feeling like they've been left out.
Yeah, like they're being pushed aside.
Yeah, and left behind.
Yeah.
Without any real opportunities.
Like they don't have a future.
It's like this economic disenfranchisement that's fueling this social unrest.
Exactly. That's exactly what Yunus is saying.
Yeah.
He sees this direct connection between feeling left out and the disillusionment and anger that we're seeing globally.
Right.
He describes this world that's becoming more and more polarized between the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
And these two groups, they have less and less in common, except maybe distrust and fear and even hostility toward each other.
And he makes this point that this divide is likely to get even bigger as information technology spreads even to the poorest people.
Especially with social media.
Yeah, it's like the more people become aware of how unequal things are, the more they feel this injustice.
Because they can see.
Right.
They can see what others have, and it just highlights what they're missing out on.
So this leads to the question of how we usually deal with poverty and inequality.
Exactly.
And Yunus talks about charity and welfare, and he acknowledges that they come from a good place, like people are trying to help. But his main point is that these are temporary fixes.
Yeah. Band-aids.
Yeah, for a much bigger systemic problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if the system itself is the issue, where does Yunus see the main flaw?
Well, he goes pretty deep.
Okay.
He looks at some really basic assumptions about human nature that underpin our economic thinking.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so Yunus argues that a key problem is in the core assumptions of neoclassical economics.
Right.
This is the school of thought that's had a huge influence on modern economic policy.
Okay.
And it often assumes that people are primarily motivated by self-interest.
Well,
and they're always trying to maximize their own profit.
Right. So he's saying this focus on personal gain, often at the expense of others.
Yeah.
It's like baked into our economic system.
It's at the very foundation.
Right.
And he doesn't mince words here.
Okay.
He suggests that this assumption encourages people to be indifferent to the well-being of others.
Right.
But it can also lead to much worse behavior, like greed, exploitation, and selfishness.
And he even says that some economists consider this self-seeking behavior not a problem.
I know, right?
But a virtue of what he calls capitalist man.
Exactly, capitalist man.
It's a pretty strong critique.
It is a point of critique, for sure.
Yeah, but what I find really interesting is that he doesn't just stop at criticizing.
Right.
He actually offers a different way forward.
He does.
Which he calls a counter-economics, built around this idea of social business.
Yeah, and he points out that globally, there are thousands of people and hundreds of social businesses already working to build this new form of capitalism.
That's pretty amazing.
It is.
So they're already doing it.
Yeah.
Not just a theory.
Not just a theory, no.
That's great.
He points to the Grameen Bank and other initiatives in Bangladesh as examples of this approach in action.
So it's like he's saying, look, we're already seeing a willingness to reconsider these core assumptions of neoclassical economics.
Exactly. And if we're open to that, he thinks we can create a new economic system.
Okay.
One that's designed to serve everyone's needs.
Okay, so it's about designing a system that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly, and giving everyone the chance to reach their full potential.
Okay, I like it.
Good, good.
He also tackles this seemingly insurmountable problem of wealth concentration.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from the big issues.
No, he doesn't.
And what he says is that this extreme wealth concentration, it's not some inevitable outcome or a fact of life that we can't change.
Okay.
It's something that we've created through our choices and the systems we've put in place.
So he believes we can solve it.
He does. He really does.
But we have to be willing to challenge the existing paradigms.
Exactly. The way we think about things.
Right. The assumptions that got us here. And it's interesting that he points out how most attempts to deal with wealth concentration focus on income redistribution.
Right. Things like progressive taxation.
Yeah. Taking from the wealthy and giving to the poor through various programs.
Yeah, that's the standard approach.
And while those measures can help in the short term,
they can.
Yunus's own experiences, starting with the Grameen Bank, led him to a deeper understanding.
Okay.
He realized that it's not just about redistributing existing wealth.
Right.
It's about creating a system that's more inclusive from the beginning.
Yeah, a system that provides opportunities for everyone.
So not just moving money around, but changing the whole system.
Exactly.
To make it fairer.
Right from the get-go.
And this is where the idea of creating new businesses, specifically to solve problems of the poor, comes in.
Right.
He emphasizes that businesses are good at achieving goals.
They are. They're designed for it.
Yeah. And he's talking about providing goods and services that people need and will pay for.
So it's not just about charity.
Right.
It's about creating sustainable solutions.
Yeah. So it's about harnessing that power and using it for social good.
Instead of just focusing on profit.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so let's talk about his vision for achieving zero poverty.
Okay, sounds good.
He uses this example from Uganda to illustrate this really important point about the entrepreneurial spirit that exists even among the very poorest people.
He found this amazing entrepreneurial spirit even in developing countries at the very bottom of the economy.
Yeah, and he's saying there are already tons of small businesses.
Millions of them.
Wow.
Operating in these communities.
Doing what?
Making small but important improvements in people's lives.
So the drive is there.
It absolutely is.
But he highlights a missing piece.
Right.
The lack of support systems.
Yeah, the infrastructure isn't there.
To help these small businesses grow.
They need resources, access to credit, and markets.
He's saying the ingenuity and the willingness is there.
It is.
But they're being held back.
Yeah, by lack of support.
And he says this isn't unique to Uganda.
Right. It's a pattern.
It's a global issue.
Yeah, you see it in lots of emerging economies.
And it's not just about money.
Right.
It's also about a culture of economic freedom.
Yeah, the freedom to start and run a business.
Even in countries that are considered to have a free market.
Yeah, sometimes the reality on the ground is different.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, Yunus brings up the 2008 food crisis.
Right. That was a wake-up call.
It was.
For the whole world.
Yeah, it showed how vulnerable we all are.
Exactly.
He mentions UN reports about reduced food rations.
Yeah, and those scary price increases.
Yeah, for basic foods.
Yeah, staples.
It was a shock to see headlines about food shortages and riots.
Yeah, things we thought were in the past.
And Yunus traces some of the causes back to the globalization of food markets.
Over the past few decades.
And it's interesting because he's a big supporter of free trade.
He is.
But he also stresses that global food markets need rules.
Yeah, reasonable regulations.
And make sure everyone benefits.
And to prevent the system from becoming too unstable.
Right. So he's not against free trade.
No.
But he thinks it needs to be managed fairly.
Yeah, managed in a way that works for everyone.
Okay. And he also brings up this point about rising demand for meat.
Yeah, as developing countries become more prosperous.
Which is a good thing in a way.
It is. It shows rising living standards.
But it can also strain global food supplies.
Yeah, and contribute to those price distortions.
And even shortages.
Right. It's a complex issue.
And then there's the 2008 financial collapse.
Oh, yeah. Another major turning point.
Yunus sees that as another big failure.
He does.
And he argues that it happened because the financial system was distorted from its original purpose.
Which should be to serve human needs.
Right. Allocating capital to productive businesses.
Instead of chasing unrealistic returns.
Yeah, through these complicated financial schemes.
Yeah, that financial engineering.
It did feel like the whole system was just focused on creating and trading these incredibly complex financial instruments.
It had all these hidden risks.
And when it all came crashing down, the consequences were felt everywhere.
It was a global crisis.
So this brings us back to the Grameen Bank.
Okay.
And how their mission expanded over time.
Right.
They started by providing small loans.
Yeah, microcredit.
But they realized they needed to address a wider range of problems.
The problems faced by the poor.
So they began creating these financially sustainable businesses to tackle things like access to seeds, sanitation.
Clean water.
Yeah.
All essential things.
And this is where the core principles of social business come in.
Right.
He gives examples like Grameen Danone Foods.
Yeah, a great example.
A joint venture to provide nutritious yogurt.
Affordable yogurt.
In Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And the key here is that neither Grameen nor Danone took any profit.
That's right. The goal was to improve nutrition.
Not to make money.
Exactly.
Another good illustration is Grameen Veolia water.
Yeah, tackling that arsenic contamination problem.
Which is a huge issue there.
It is a major health risk.
They set up a system to treat and distribute clean water, selling it at a low price to cover costs.
But again, no profit.
So it's about sustainability.
Yeah.
Not profit.
Exactly.
And it's not just basic needs.
No, they also address education.
He talks about the Grameen Healthcare Trust.
Yeah, and their partnership with Glasgow Caledonian University.
Right.
To set up a nursing college.
For the daughters of Grameen Bank borrowers.
Yeah, and the graduates have really high employment rates.
So it's a pathway out of poverty.
Through education and good jobs.
This success in Bangladesh leads to the question of scalability.
Can it work elsewhere?
Right. Can this social business model be adapted to other parts of the world?
Different cultures, different economies.
Yunus believes it can.
He's confident.
And he introduces Yunus Social Business,
YSB,
to spread this idea globally.
Yeah, both the theory and the practice.
He describes YSB as a business incubator and a venture fund.
But with a big difference.
Okay, what's that?
They have a no profit, no dividend rule.
So they're not looking to make money.
Nope. Their goal is to solve problems.
And any surplus they generate is reinvested.
Back into the business or used to create new social businesses.
So it's a complete reversal
of the traditional model.
Where profit comes first.
Yeah, it's a different way of thinking.
He gives the example of YSB in France.
Okay.
Where they're supporting Action Tank Enterprises and Pauvreté.
Right.
This group works with corporations to create social businesses.
To address the needs of the poor in France.
Things like affordable glasses.
Emergency shelter, home insurance, banking services.
So it shows that these principles can work even in developed economies.
Yeah, it's not just for developing countries.
Okay, let's move on to the second zero.
Zero, unemployment.
Yunus really puts a human face on unemployment.
Yeah, he calls it a cruel punishment.
He does.
That wastes human potential.
And he contrasts that with our natural desire to be active.
To be creative, to solve problems.
It's not just an economic statistic.
No, it's about people's lives.
And he focuses on the hopelessness felt by unemployed young people.
Especially in developed countries.
Yeah, he says it's a failure of the system.
To provide meaningful opportunities.
These are often educated people who can't afford a home or start a family.
Many are burdened with student loan debt.
It's like society has no place for them.
It's a terrible feeling.
And he's clear that it's not their fault.
Right.
He says it's the system that's flawed.
The idea that people are born to work for a few job creators.
It's a very top-down view.
Yeah, and he criticizes the traditional solutions.
Like economic growth and infrastructure projects.
Or government job programs.
He says they don't address the root of the problem.
Which is dependence.
Dependence on traditional jobs. He then offers this counterexample.
Okay.
Human Harbor Corporation in Japan.
Right.
They employ ex-prisoners.
Often seen as unemployable.
In waste recycling.
And they've become self-sustaining.
That's amazing.
And they've even sparked new social businesses.
It shows that everyone has potential.
Exactly.
He also talks about the Nabin program.
Yeah, based on the belief that everyone can be an entrepreneur.
They provide funds, expertise, and support
to low-income youth in Bangladesh
to help them start businesses
and escape unemployment.
And he points out that the Grameen model isn't limited to developing countries.
Right.
He talks about Grameen America.
Yeah, their success in the U.S.
Working with low-income women.
Many of whom are undocumented immigrants.
And they have these incredibly high repayment rates.
It challenges the assumptions.
About who's a good risk.
Yeah.
And there are plans to create a Nabin program in the U.S.
That's great.
To invest in businesses started by young Americans.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the paradox of high unemployment. In a country that's supposed to be all about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Yunus basically reframes this challenge of youth unemployment.
Yeah.
He sees it as an opportunity.
To unleash a wave of new entrepreneurs.
He even suggests that we might see labor shortages.
Wow.
As more people become self-employed.
That's a bold prediction.
It is.
Okay, so let's talk about the third zero.
Okay, zero net carbon emissions.
Yeah, the environmental piece.
Yunus explains this commitment in countries like Bangladesh to fix their environmental practices.
And their goal is zero net carbon.
Which means reducing emissions.
As much as possible.
And using things like carbon capture.
To mitigate what they can't eliminate.
It's surprising to hear this level of commitment.
I know, right?
From a developing country.
You usually hear it from developed nations.
And there's this assumption that developing countries will follow the same polluting path.
Yeah, the same mistakes.
But Yunus challenges that.
He points out Bangladesh's vulnerability to climate change.
Right, they're on the front lines.
For them, it's not just an ideal, it's about survival.
He also mentions their energy scarcity.
And the potential for collaboration.
Like with Nepal.
On clean hydropower.
They could leapfrog over fossil fuels.
Yeah, go straight to renewables.
He also talks about environmental crimes against the poor.
Yeah, how pollution disproportionately affects them.
And how it makes it harder to escape poverty.
It's a vicious cycle.
And he gives the example of Grameen Shakti.
Bringing solar energy to rural Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Transforming the energy market and enabling internet access.
It's amazing how much of a difference that makes.
It's huge.
And it's inspired other renewable energy companies.
Yeah, competition is a good thing.
He also mentions green bioenergy in Uganda.
Making charcoal briquettes from agricultural waste.
And efficient cook stoves.
Yeah, addressing deforestation, health problems from smoke, and affordability.
And they're doing well in the market.
Proving that social business can be profitable.
He emphasizes that all social businesses should be environmentally sustainable,
regardless of their main purpose.
It's not just about specific environmental businesses.
No, it's a principle that applies to all of them.
He also sees a big role for social businesses in developed countries.
Yeah.
To address environmental issues here.
Renewable energy, recycling, clean water, sustainable farming.
There's so much potential for innovation
in the environmental sector.
This leads us to Yunus's roadmap to a better future.
Okay, let's hear.
Where he connects his ideas to the Sustainable Development Goals.
The SDGs.
He starts by talking about the Millennium Development Goals.
The MDGs.
And the progress that was made.
Like Bangladesh's success in reducing poverty.
Yeah, and achieving gender parity in education.
And improving health outcomes.
It's important to remember that while we didn't achieve all the MDGs,
right,
we did make progress.
We did.
Especially in reducing extreme poverty globally.
That was a huge accomplishment.
Yunus sees the SDGs as a groundbreaking effort.
Bringing nations together to solve global problems.
And the emphasis on sustainable is key.
Yeah, thinking about the long-term impact of our choices.
He links inequality to potential future crises.
Social unrest, refugee flows, conflicts over resources.
It's a stark warning.
It is.
That these issues are all connected.
We can't ignore them.
He highlights key SDGs like no poverty.
Zero hunger, good health and well-being.
Quality education. Gender equality,
clean water and sanitation,
affordable and clean energy,
decent work and economic growth.
It's a comprehensive agenda.
And for a better future.
He specifically points out targets related to social protection.
Yeah, ensuring that the most vulnerable are taken care of.
And access to resources for the poor.
Yeah, everyone should have a chance.
He encourages everyone to adopt the SDGs
as personal and organizational goals.
He believes our current path is unsustainable.
And the SDGs are a roadmap for change.
So Yunus identifies what he calls mega powers for transforming the world.
Okay, who are they?
The first is youth.
The next generation.
He highlights this statistic that most millennials don't support capitalism as it is.
Interesting.
We're open to alternatives.
They are.
He sees them as the ones who will create a new civilization.
A more sustainable and equitable one.
They're better educated, more diverse, and globally connected.
Through technology.
And he talks about the importance of imagination.
Yeah, envisioning a better future.
He thinks that's the first step to making it happen.
It sparks activism and change.
He sees youth as a megapower.
With the potential to redesign the economic structure.
He points to the growth of social business courses.
And Yunus social business centers at universities.
It's a growing movement.
It is.
He mentions organizations like Make Sense and Unison Youth.
International networks of young people dedicated to social business.
And the Social Business Youth Alliance in Bangladesh.
With their Social Business Champ competition and YY Goshti Innovation Camp.
Supporting young social entrepreneurs.
It's all about nurturing the next generation.
The second megapower is technology.
Yeah, the tool for change.
Yunus is excited about its potential for good.
But he stresses that it's just a tool.
It's up to us to use it wisely.
He points out that most tech development isn't focused on the needs of the poor.
Right.
He highlights the investment in robotics and AI for military and commercial purposes.
While problems like poverty and disease get less attention,
it's a misallocation of resources.
He gives the example of endless computers.
Affordable technology for underserved populations.
With a social business arm.
Yeah, providing education and health services.
He also talks about Kiva.
Connecting lenders with entrepreneurs in developing countries.
Enabling access to financing for those who can't get traditional loans.
And they have amazing repayment rates.
And the food assembly.
Connecting consumers with local producers.
Reducing waste and supporting local economies.
Yeah, technology can make a real difference.
Yunus criticizes tech companies for neglecting the poor.
He points out the difficulties faced by small farmers.
Yeah, like accessing agricultural insurance.
There's a lack of tailored solutions.
And this is where Grameen Intel comes in.
Yeah, developing software for the poor.
Often designed for smartphones.
Because mobile technology is becoming widespread.
He mentions the Meritica app for soil analysis.
Used by entrepreneurs to support farmers.
And boost the rural economy.
Yeah, technology can empower people.
He also highlights Grameen Intel's work on healthcare solutions.